Okay, so after having talked about all the different marketing systems you get, and marketing types, and also talking about how supply and demand works, now we're going to look at how the marketing chain, or sometimes known as the value chain, works. So the reason why they call it the value chain is because every time or the route or the pathway your product takes from farm being produced all the way to the buyer's home, that route or the pathway it takes, every time you do something to the product, changing it, packaging it, processing it, or doing something to change what it looks like, you're technically adding value to it. So meaning at the end, when it eventually gets to the grocery store or to the shop where it's going to be sold, it's going to be more expensive than actually what it actually cost the farmer to produce, let's say, one apple or one orange. So every time you changed what they look like, you add value to it. So basically the value chain or the marketing chain has a couple of steps. It depends on the type of product you're trying to sell, but usually it looks something like this that's shown on the slide here. The product is produced on the farm. Here they've got a nice picture of, let's say, lemons or oranges. Then your second step usually is harvesting, and then obviously transporting your product off the farm. Then firstly you have to process it, maybe washing it, cleaning it, and then storing it until it can be sent to somewhere else where it needs to be processed. And then after it has been processed, it can further be distributed maybe, and then it must eventually be packaged, and obviously while it's being packaged it gets handled. And then lastly, after it's nice and maybe bottled or packaged, it goes to the retailer to be sold in the market. So depending on the type of product, these steps could be 3 steps instead of like 6 that they're showing here. It depends completely on what you're trying to sell. But generally, this is what your value chain looks like. So basically, your concept then of the marketing chain is this pathway or the route that the product specifically follows from the farmer on the farm to the consumer where they bought it and it's now at their home or they can enjoy it. So yes, also the first link usually is the farm, especially if we're talking about fresh produce and especially if we're looking at the agricultural value chain. So usually for agriculture, things start at the farm, whether it's animals or plants that they're producing. So then also lastly, the marketing chain is also sometimes called the agribusiness chain or just simply the supply chain because the produce is that's being supplied to the customer. So here is a simple diagram showing you in picture format, that same thing, the marketing chain. Many times in the exam, they will show you something like this and ask you to identify it. So then you'll have to notice, okay, so we've got a farm over here. The next step is preparation of the product. It could be packaged, transported, and eventually goes to the consumer or maybe the market where the consumer can buy it. And then you have to notice, okay, this is obviously the value chain or the marketing chain. They have to take either one of those terms as correct. But also the thing I want to show in this picture is they have 2 routes. So this is mainly a short route, but it can also take a different route depending on what, again, type of product you have. Maybe if it's maize or even wheat, it has to be milled first, changed in some way, then it has to be stored at a place. Eventually from the storage it can be transported to where it needs to go. But here's something interesting that's happening here. Sometimes I ask you guys what can influence your value chain, especially the supply side. So something like delays, maybe from a storage unit to be transported to the market, something's happening. Maybe there has been an accident with the transport truck. Maybe some of your produce have been stolen, so theft happens. Also, there's handling costs influenced with this bit, so meaning it costs money, maybe fuel money or a flat tire or whatever. Something costs money to actually transport the produce from maybe the farm or the storage unit to the market itself. So this adds, again, this step would add value again to this chain, but something like accidents or theft actually disrupts the chain. I mean, this is where everything stops. So then if the product has been stolen, obviously it can't eventually be transported and go to market. So this then stops it. Okay, so some factors here that also mentioned that hamper this value chain. We just talked about it, theft and so on. But you also have labor costs that also adds value to it. Not necessarily hampers it, but it does make the value chain a bit more expensive, or the product at the end will make it more expensive. Then also your infrastructure, meaning storage, if you need to store it. Maybe again with that which hampers the value chain, meaning stopping it. Maybe the storage unit burned down or something happened and all your produce was burned down with it. So that can also stop your supply chain or the value chain. But generally storage also adds value to your value chain. Then we talked about the transport, and then also something like lack of capital. If there's no capital, either from the farmer side or even the manufacturer side, those that maybe process the product and so on, if they don't have the money to process or package the product, they can also stop it, the value chain from happening. And also we talked about accidents, thefts, and also spoilage of any of these products. So again, halfway before the produce gets to market, if it spoils, it has to be thrown away because it can't be used, nobody will buy it. Okay, so then lastly, there's kind of roles of some rules of legislation, agricultural marketing. There's some laws having to do with your marketing chain and marketing in general. So especially with food, whether it's again plants or animal based. First of all, the laws are there to help with for safety reasons. You want the food that is sold on market to be healthy and pose no health risk to anyone who buys it and eats it. Otherwise, again, it could cause people not buying the produce, but more seriously, it can actually cause health effects, or people get nauseous or whatever, can really get sick, and they can then sue basically the markets that sold it, or maybe they can I want to say the manufacturers generally can get sued, or the farmer can get sued for putting these products on market that was not up to standard. So then secondly, yes, firstly for safety, secondly it is for standard and quality. So meaning everything that is sold has a stamp of approval, should have the stamp of approval that this thing is again healthy to eat. The quality of this produce is there. Meaning if you say it's class A, then it is class A, or if it says that is class 3 or C or B or whatever, then it has to be that class. So the standard and the quality has to be up to scratch. Then the rest of the slide here shows a bit more different laws. The textbook does not pertinently talk about these laws, so these are just for interest's sake, and if they maybe sometimes for extra marks they do ask, mention one or two safety laws concerning the marketing chain, because some of these laws actually were discussed in the grade 10 textbook, so sometimes I do like to ask these questions. The first thing is the Marketing of Agricultural Products Act, again having to do with how to market these produce safely and correctly. Agricultural Product Standards Act, meaning again safety standards and quality has to apply here. The Perishable Products Export Control Act, as it says, all things as gets exported, that must be controlled. The quality again, maybe the cost of it, everything is controlled. Then Meat Safety Act, it's self-explanatory. Then Agricultural Produce Agents Act, and also Consumer Protection Act. So this more, the last two has to do with the people working with the food and trying to sell the food. Okay, that's basically it for this lesson, and the last one is coming up.